lightsaber going, yeah!
Oh no, it's clearly
And Revenge of the Sith.
unlimited power. That's clearly the magnum opus of those movies.
Unquestionably, any candidate for the best image of the prequels has to come from Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah, well, obviously, because that's also just the one where, like, the guy... Who the fuck played the Emperor again?
Ian McDiarmid.
Yeah.
He just said, like, man, I don't give a fuck.
He's great.
Yeah, it's wonderful. But
he was the original Emperor, too, wasn't he?
Yes, he played the Emperor going all the way back to Return of the Jedi.
Oh, my God.
But before I forget, I have to make a correction to something I said in the last episode, which is that I have seen another Ang Lee movie besides Life of Pi and Sense and Sensibility and now Crouching Tiger and Dragon. I forgot that Ang Lee directed Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk, one of the worst movies I have ever seen, full stop. Not just one of the worst movies I've paid to see, one of the worst movies I've ever seen, maybe one of the worst movies ever made, quite frankly.
Oh my God.
You can tell the Dallas Cowboys did not want to license their brand for the movie. Oh, good lord.
Boy.
Good lord.
Boy.
My heart breaks for Ang Lee. But hey, Crouching Tiger and Dragon is great.
Yeah, and Ang Lee. He's made some unabashedly great movies, and also
that.
But guys,
here we are. Welcome back to the Hack Fraud Show.
Hello.
We are all in the same room.
Hey.
We'd long promised a Rian Johnson episode for some reasons that didn't end up happening.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll kick that down the line, perhaps not. I still haven't watched either of the movies, but I just got Looper on DVD from the library, so perhaps I'll watch it at some point.
I'm not treading Looper.
We're here, we're talking Star Wars. This is going to be a big...
This could be the moment.
John's been seething ever since we saw The Last Jedi together on Friday.
I have a lot of anger, Tyler. A lot of unrestrained, uncontrolled anger.
John, anger is the path to the dark side. Don't give in.
Anger is the path to being cool, like Lord Vader.
That's what they always tell us.
Yeah.
Except it's actually true. But
hey man, like, this universe just keeps building death empires, and we need to figure out why.
It's because you can't possibly have any other antagonist.
Yeah.
Who else are you going... If you don't, you end up with someone like, I don't know, Count Dooku.
Yeah, well,
or
maybe
someone worse, like a trade federation.
Well, maybe this is just, like, why, like, I could never make a Star Wars movie, because I would just go, like, ooh, the Empire is Austria-Hungary, I can make it about statecraft and multi-ethnicity.
I'm very sure the Empire is supposed to represent Nazi Germany and not much else.
Well, clearly, but I want to make it more interesting.
Oh, that's too dangerous.
You're right. You're right. That's why I would never make it. Because they go like, wait a minute, you want to make it about like state building and like nationalism? And what the fuck is wrong with you?
Anyway, we're talking about. We will talk about The Last Jedi eventually. This is just going to be a big kind of free-ranging conversation. We're talking about Empire. We're talking about Force Awakens. We're talking about The Last Jedi. But
do we want to talk about anything else?
Well, we might talk about what we've been watching.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which
is mine Star Wars related, so.
But just to have something else to lighten up this
break
episode.
things up.
So anyone who doesn't care about Star Wars can listen to this episode and have something to grab onto.
Yeah.
We'll see how it goes. So, what have we been watching?
So, I think I forgot to mention this, because I knew we would be talking about it, but a couple weeks ago, I watched A New Hope.
Okay. Can we maybe wait on that?
Let's wait on
save
that.
Save that for when we delve into Star Wars proper.
Okay.
I mean, I have practically seen nothing. So I think...
Okay.
So it's time to talk about Seven Samurai.
It's all down to me. Oh, I have a lot of things to talk about besides Seven Samurai.
Ooh.
Oh boy, yeah. I had a big week. So, anyway, I saw a few movies. I saw Margot Robbie in I, Tonya Harding biopic. John apparently knows nothing about this.
How was that?
It was good. I liked it. I liked it a lot. Margot Robbie is great. She gets a full-on Oscar showcase, and
Okay.
she's very good. Allison Janney's in this movie too, playing her mother. She is amazing.
She looks from the trailer. She looked a lot like. Oh fuck! Now I'm blanking on the name. Damn it! Fuck.
Okay.
You looked at the TV and it destroyed your thinking.
While I wait for Reed to get his memory back, I'll just say
It was the actress who played like the snobby conductor in Snowpiercer.
Oh, Tilda Swinton.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. Anyway, this movie, I think one review called it the Goodfellas of skating, which is the most accurate thing anyone can say about this movie. It's the Goodfellas mode. Like Goodfellas has become a mode. Like it's
big, sprawling,
it's become
lots of characters.
Not so much that, but more in the filmmaking style.
Okay.
In that way, Goodfellas, I think, has become almost something of a subgenre. One that Scorsese has even returned to several times.
Yeah.
But yes, just a freewheeling, like, constantly mobile camera, always spinning, lots of pop music, lots of subjectivity, multiple narrators. They do an interesting thing where they kind of frame it with fake documentary interviews with the characters.
I always have a soft spot for that.
Yeah, it's all pretty interesting. I think it loses focus a bit once you get to the thing that everyone came to the Tonya Harding movie to see, which is The Scandal.
Yeah.
I don't know, there's a lot of well done stuff in it. I didn't, love it. It's not a great movie, but it's fun and it's worth a watch, and the performances are great. Sebastian Stan is in this, and it shows you just how utterly wasted he is as the Winter Soldier. I think one of my favorite lines of film criticism that I've ever read was in the AV Club's review of this movie, where it said, in parentheses, Sebastian Stan, who apparently can act. And, yes, he can.
Yeah.
So give this man more interesting material.
Interesting.
So that's that.
Yeah, this sounds like something I really like.
Perhaps you would. On the flip side of the coin, I saw James Franco's The Disaster Artist.
Fuck me sideways.
How was that?
Not good.
Yeah, that was...
The only reason this movie exists is for the actors playing dress-up recreations of the iconography of The Room.
Yeah, and we are not, as big... here's the thing. We love funny, bad movies.
Yeah.
But we are not really big devotees of The Room.
I have said it before, and I will say it again. The Room is not worth anyone's time. It is not fun to watch. It is a waste of everyone's hour and 40 minutes, and it's just appalling. It's appalling that someone could lack competence so utterly. And anything worth seeing from the movie has already been memed to death, so there's no reason to watch the whole movie.
I'm pretty sure the only form of the movie that's that may be acceptable to watch would be the CinemaSins review of
or when the Nostalgia Critic did his old review of it.
The one thing that makes the movie almost worth seeing is the book, The Disaster Artist, which is actually...
Well, the book sounds fascinating.
The book is fascinating, and I recommend everybody read it, but the movie... James Franco pretty much loses all the clarity around Tommy Wiseau as a person, because if you read the book, it becomes very clear that Tommy Wiseau is a terrible, terrible, emotionally manipulative human being.
Well, yeah, and everything about him just seemed like it would seem so easy to make a hit piece on him.
Yeah,
and though granted, maybe there's something around.
But the book, I would not describe the book as a hit piece.
Oh,
it's a very sensitive, very thoughtful. It was written by the closest thing Tommy Wiseau has to a friend, I assume, and his account of everything is really interesting. But Tommy Wiseau, I think, is not a person who deserves any of the notoriety or fame that he has gained. I don't think he's someone who deserves to be in the culture as much as he is. He is a sad, terrible man who can't do anything competently, and I just don't understand. But, good for him, I guess. And The Disaster Artist, it's whatever. It's nothing really.
I mean, I just hate the Seth Rogen, James Franco brain trust.
Well, Seth Rogen is the MVP of the movie. Okay. Quite frankly, his character is the MVP of the Room set, and he is the MVP of the film. He's great. He brings a self-awareness to it that the whole rest of it is lacking.
Okay. And
also, Josh Hutcherson and Zac Efron are there playing people, and that's fun.
Okay.
But other than that, just no. Anyway, then to close out, I saw all three of these movies in one weekend, by the way.
Interesting.
I went and saw the new movie by our old friend Guillermo del Toro, The Shape of Water, which I enjoyed quite a bit. Not as much as everyone else seems to have been. It's It's a very good, like, well-done movie. It's not at the level of Pan's Labyrinth, so few things are.
Yeah, well, from what I've seen, like, the trailers kind of make it look like it's like, okay, this is just kind of going to be like Guillermo del Toro making, like, technical show-stopping piece and not too much else.
Yeah, it's a very simple, like, love story between a woman and an amphibian man. It's basically, you know, his take on Beauty and the Beast, with the twist that Beauty is a very sexual being.
Interesting.
That comes into play in a lot of interesting ways.
Okay, that's interesting.
But there's not a whole lot more to the movie than that. But it's a very well told story, just done very well. Technically, the movie's a marvel. The performances are great. I saw Guillermo del Toro. He came to my school, gave a talk, talked about the movie a little bit.
You lucky bastard.
There are almost no static shots in the movie, which was something he was keen to emphasize.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, well, like, that's something you notice of all of his stuff. Like, his camera is always moving in every shot.
Yeah, and this movie is no exception. The production design is great. The makeup and creature design, as always, is great. This movie was made for less than $20 million, which is astounding if you look at the movie.
Nice.
There's a lot of good stuff going on here. Definitely worth checking out.
Okay, well, Guillermo del Toro is just one of our, like, great auteurs. And
Yeah.
like, anything he does is going to be at least very interesting.
Yeah, it's great to see him getting to do something like this again. Let's see. I rewatched the movie Gremlins with my roommates because you've never seen Gremlins?
I've never seen Gremlins.
No.
Very fun, campy '80s movie.
Okay.
Not a whole lot more to it than that.
Okay.
It's fun. It's funny. It's entertaining. It's a bit of a ride. The effects, I think, do hold up pretty well. There's some great grotesquerie. There's some great grotesquerie to it, including the moment that I will never ever forget, where the mother blows up a gremlin in the microwave. This movie was one of the many reasons the PG-13 rating was invented. But that movie's worth checking out if you haven't seen it.
Okay.
Just last night, I watched a John Huston picture called The Asphalt Jungle.
Ooh. I've heard about that.
1950 kind of crime heist noir picture. It's good. It takes some time to get going. Like, after the first 20 minutes, I was like, should I just bail on this movie? But it really does pick up steam. The heist sequence is very well done and is kind of, I think, much like the Maltese Falcon is kind of the, like, cellular blueprint for all the noir films that would come after. This is kind of the blueprint for every heist film that would come after, I think. Very similar to Rafifi in a lot of ways, just in structure and everything. And it builds to something really compelling and interesting, I think. It really does pick up steam as it goes on. And Marilyn Monroe is there in one of her first roles, looking very young and very bright-eyed and full of enthusiasm. So,
interesting.
I'd actually recommend this movie. I think it's worth checking out.
Okay, yeah.
And then, of course, I finally conquered the mountain that is Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai.
Well, Tyler, how was Seven Samurai?
Well, it's amazing. I don't know what else I am to say. It's got so much incredible stuff to it. It is a very simple story. It's interesting that this is the movie that he chose to make the epic.
Yeah.
But, it's been copied and redone all the way down to, like, A Bug's Life. It's basically the same setup. A village of farmers hire seven samurai to protect their village from bandits, and all that follows. That is basically the plot of the movie. Most of, like, the first hour is just spent kind of getting the seven samurai together, and then once they are, it's just kind of not a bullet train to the finish, but it builds and it builds, and then when the action happens, it is epic in the way that only Kurosawa can do. This movie is very funny. This movie is tragic. It's got high drama. It's got incredible action sequences. It's got romance. It's got...
it's a movie.
It's got Toshiro Mifune. He never loses the human touch in this Kurosawa. The characters are like archetypes that you know. You've got your wise leader. You've got your wide-eyed, young, naive, innocent. You've got your strong, silent type. You've got your clown figure. It's all very well done, and they all feel real and full-bodied and fully fleshed out characters. And the villagers, not all of them, but some of them get great moments too, and great moments of character work and everything. And Yeah, it's a masterpiece.
Okay.
It is all that everyone says it is.
Well, I think like Kurosawa's work has always been about like, here is our world. Let us analyze all like the human interactions that develop within it, and you just get like a bunch of like set dressing about like this is what these characters' relations are, and let's see it all blow up in like epic historical Japanese fashion.
Oh yes, I mean it's telling that like the last scene before the big final battle is a sequence where a father in the village discovers the romance between one of the samurai and his daughter, and him just blowing up in fury, and the other villagers and the samurai trying to reason with him. Seven Samurai is a movie that everyone should see.
Okay then.
And it splits very neatly into two halves, so if you have to do it that way, like I did, you can definitely do it that way.
I will attempt to seek it out when I find the attention span to do it.
Yeah, so that's Seven Samurai. And that leads us, quite well, I think, into Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope.
I'm sorry.
Or just Star Wars.
Yes, as I prefer to call it.
Yeah.
Fun little tidbit I learned, actually, just recently. Apparently, George Lucas was instrumental in funding one of Kurosawa's later movies, Kage Musha, or whatever, however you pronounce it. One of his late 80s epics. But as we all know, of course, George Lucas drew a lot from the works of Kurosawa, Hidden Fortress, Seven Samurai, all that stuff, to create Star Wars.
Which is kind of like, Star Wars is kind of like is just a kind of cultural soup of like, big base of like 30 serials, we have westerns, we have Kurosawa, kind of all wrapped up in like a like really weird editing style. Like, I think it's a reference to like the serials where they use like wipes and like fades a lot.
Yeah, I think.
Oh yeah, especially towards the beginning.
That probably has something to do with it. I actually watched this video piece recently about how the original Star Wars was apparently kind of saved in the edit.
Yeah, well, that's kind of like the famous like myth about it.
Yeah, and I think in terms of its editing, it was very pioneering in terms of the techniques that it used and all that stuff.
But also not really copied.
Yeah,
at least not like as far as like we use Back to the Ranch and like that sort of thing all the time.
I think it was influential if you look at like the way it cuts within scenes. I think that has all been very influential. And I think if you look at this movie, I also rewatched A New Hope in preparation for this, so we can talk here.
All right.
It's striking how modern this movie looks. This was really my first time going back to it like with a somewhat comprehensive knowledge of film history under my belt. And it is striking when watching these movies in the context of the 70s and of film history, they are very, very strange.
Yeah, well, they don't look like anything else that happened at the time. They don't have like set design like anything else at the time. But like the colors of them are completely different.
Well, they look so modern. One, because they've been like better preserved than most other movies of this period, and two, just because they have been so influential that I think every piece of popular filmmaking like looks like Star Wars to some degree these days. So that's all interesting. Anyway, Reed, what did you think going back to Star Wars with fresh eyes?
So going back to this, this is definitely not in the 70s context, but in the modern context, looking back. So I think I watched this again like several weeks ago. And one thing I noticed from the beginning is, this is definitely not supposed to look like a huge epic.
Yeah, right. Well, I had this theory, and like I'll bring it up here, and like I talked about this before, is that like we kind of look at Star Wars like it's like some giant like David Lean-esque epic with like huge vistas and that sort of thing, and like when you see with like all the things that have come afterwards have like tried to look like that.
That
and,
is what the prequels became.
Yeah, it's what the prequels became, and like when they do the special editions, they try to polish it to make it look like a David Lean epic. But what they really are just kind of grimy, and like they seem kind of like cobbled together in like a really interesting way.
This movie cost like I want to say like $11 million. I think.
And it's like there's lots of like location shooting and so forth.
Yeah, lots of location shooting. All the design of everything is designed to look like very run down. They talked a lot when they were making it about like this concept of like a used universe.
Yeah, like everything feels like it has like ages. It's like ages year old. Like it's like being brought down like every generation. Everything has like fingerprints on it and dust and that sort of thing.
Yeah, especially on Tatooine.
Yeah.
And probably one thing that, well, after like being caked in like the modern culture, especially around this character, I was kind of rooting for Darth Vader a little bit.
Well, we talk about this. Darth Vader is like James Earl Jones is a charismatic dude, and like that design is cool, and you're like, man, I'd follow him to the ends of the earth. He gets a bit choky at times, but
okay, this is not a sympathy that I would say I myself share.
Well, I mean, not really. I mean,
Luke is kind of a fuck in this movie.
Well, yeah, but the movie's also aware of that.
Oh yes, I would definitely.
Well, it's Natasha sticks pick up some power converters. I'm like, what?
It's kind of like Mark Hamill's still kind of like feeling out what the hell he's gonna do.
Yeah.
Though I think like by Empire he's kind of
he's got his footing down. I think.
Yes, definitely so. And then one thing that like I sort of like knew about, but then something that really came back in sort of waves is just how overtly masculine Han Solo is.
Well, is this something you came across, or is it something where like I said like or did this come from something I said by like the group chat or directly?
Both.
Okay, because like I have like especially like I only watched Empire, and it's been a while since I've seen the original Star Wars. I think the last time I saw it was when you did like your big like kind of party.
Oh yes,
for it, and like in the context, and we'll get to kind of Empire, but like Han Solo is someone who's just constantly putting the moves on people, constantly undermining authority, and constantly undermining women in authority.
Well, he's always undermining authority.
Yeah,
period.
In general, but like when that gendered context comes up, it's kind of we kind of see what we've been talking about a lot since like Weinstein came out.
Well, sort of.
Not. I don't feel like as much in New Hope, but maybe more in Empire.
We'll get to Empire.
Certainly, I don't think it's as poisonous.
No.
But
it's not. It's no Weinstein, but I think some of that culture is here.
Maybe. Anyway. So the thing with New Hope, watching it this time, I think you can really see like how this movie was just kind of like stitched together, like a very kind of on the fly, like I'm trying to think of the right word here, just kind of ramshackle like structure,
kind of like by the seat of your pants.
Yeah, and you can like the sound mixing on it is kind of weird, like The ADR, like, definitely stuck out to me this time as I was watching. This is a movie that is held together by grit, spit, and ADR, which is fine because it works perfectly.
Well, it has charm. There's kind of
like
there's a low budget charm to it, which is something you wouldn't expect from like something that's worshipped. But
you're very right. It is not an epic. There are like 3 key locations. It's all just executed with a lot of confidence, with very like straight-faced sincerity, for better or for ill. In the prequels, it's all for ill, of course. But
we'll also get to like in the new ones, they try to be like, oh, let's be tongue-in-cheek, and
that is not what Star Wars is about. I still love this movie.
I still do too.
It's an incredible work. It is hard to separate it from my childhood and from what it showed me that movies could do and what movies could be. But I think just, the world building is incredible. It's so efficient. Like, George Lucas was so good at that time, and I think his collaborators also probably had something to do with this, because I saw the original version of the opening crawl that was in this movie, and let's just say the seeds of the prequels are all there.
Oh, buddy.
But, whoever George Lucas had working with him who got him to fix that, praise be to them, and it all totally worked. And the movie just is so... It feels so effortless at just throwing you into this universe and being like, here you go. This is it. This is what you need to know. We're not going to worry about anything else. Let's go.
This definitely has like that sort of high definition world building where it's just so much and you don't really know anything, but you're plunged in anyways, but then you're really quick to catch it on, which I think is one of the huge problems with like the newer movies that they throw too much at, and then it's like, we can't make sense of any of this. What's important? What's not? God damn it, JJ.
Right, because the new ones are far less good at determining like what is supposed to be important and what isn't.
Yeah.
This movie is focused. It is telling a very clear, very narrow story about like these people in this broader conflict and how they relate to each other and like the adventure that they go on. It is...
Star Wars has always been good at like insinuating scale with very little.
Yeah,
this feels like some like blown up epic that has been occurring for centuries, even though it's like an $11 million project stitched together from backlots and just like whoever we can get.
You don't even see the Emperor in this movie. They just kind of talk about him. They talk about like the government, like in vague terms. And it's all just kind of like, okay, whatever. Like
Darth Vader is practically in a Halloween costume, and it still works.
Yeah, I love this movie. Okay. I think it's maybe not quite perfect. There are a few flaws in it, but you know, it is a defining text of film history. It is the moment when cinema changed forever and never looked back. And
for better and for ill.
For better and for worse, but this movie... you can blame it for a lot of things, but like I can't fault it for those things. Okay. And I just love it.
Well, we're gonna get into this more like with Empire, but like I think like all of my musings on Star Wars are so extra filmic because I really don't have like the like my only real childhood experience with it is like there's some movies in there, but it's mostly just like pure cultural osmosis. And what we glean onto Star Wars more than like what Star Wars actually is as like an initial concept of like dirty used universe, etc.
Well, I have to imagine that for people who like have never seen Star Wars before, like seeing it for the first time must be
eye-opening.
Must be like one of those things where it's like, oh, okay, so this is actually a movie.
Yeah,
like it's not just a collection of iconography, although you could make the case that maybe it is. But
we'll get to that.
But I have no problem. Like I came to this through the movies, through all like the elements of the universe. Like before I had even seen the movies, I had a book that I think was called Star Wars: The Visual Dictionary. And I just immersed myself in the universe to the point where like when I saw the movie, I was like, okay, this is the story that they're telling in the context of this universe. And I just, you know, now obviously I am far less interested in all that than I used to be.
Yeah.
But it holds up beautifully as a movie, I think. And it you can certainly, I think we're going to get into some people, like John perhaps, have trouble separating the movie from the cultural icon.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it comes... So are we ready to get into Empire, or...
I have one last thing. So this is
certainly.
So it's very fast. So this is definitely a movie that really kicks off the whole, you know, fandom of Star Wars, the later episodes of Star Wars, the extended universe of Star Wars, to essentially, like, come together around, like, this rather cheap film.
Yeah.
But still magnificent, and still captivates the imaginations of all, including the hack frauds later on.
It's shocking how successful this movie was. I mean, George Lucas talked about this in his interview with Charlie Rose, which everyone should watch, you know, scandals notwithstanding. Like, because it's just fascinating what it says about George Lucas and his relationship to this whole thing. I believe, I'm maybe paraphrasing somewhat here, but he says something to the effect of, look, Star Wars was an art film. It was never supposed to be successful. It's about a dog flying a spaceship.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how it happened.
Yeah, well, the sort of go into here as far as that, like, I mean, like, we have, like, readily said before that, like, Star Wars ruined cinema and blockbuster cinema forever.
Well,
and, like,
Jaws had something to do with that,
Jaws has something to do with that, too,
Jaws,
but, like, Jaws is not everywhere right now.
That is true.
And, like, it is, like, very difficult to me to, like, look at like, this project of Star Wars and be like, yeah, it's charming. Like, yeah, I see where people are coming from, but I can't really forgive it for ruining cinema. And like it is, and like even like in its like amoebic form, it is still like nostalgia. All of its reference points are old.
Yeah.
Like everything about it is like recalling to something that you liked but don't really know a lot about. it really isn't. It actually isn't a lot like those old serials, really at all.
No.
It pulls more from like westerns and Kurosawa more than anything. But I think like people think like, oh, serials, Star Wars, okay.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
Well,
I think the newer movies definitely pull from nostalgia.
Well, the new movies pull from like Star Wars and Star Wars alone, which is so much worse. But we'll get to that.
Well, I think that it's interesting because George Lucas kind of pioneered this form to a certain extent of the nostalgia mash pit movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Where he like blended together all his influences and spit out something like not entirely new, but like new enough. I think this is like kind of a movie that's kind of a kindred spirit to say like the works of Quentin Tarantino. Albeit
that's a good comparison.
Albeit with like more sincerity.
Oh
but,
yeah.
Well, the Tarantino art form is almost like the French New Wave, where it's like cutting it up, and like remixing and doing crazy things. With
certainly,
it.
like less of a deconstructive perspective on all of it, but still kind of in that mode. I think.
Yeah, I just think to say like I think like Spielberg did the same thing with Indiana Jones, but with like far more craft.
Sure.
To it. Whereas like Star Wars, it's still like Chinsky and rough around the edges, and I can admire that because like that is charming because especially considering it is just so sincere, it is just so straight laced. But like I kind of just don't care about the world. I kind of just don't care. I mean like these are wonderful designs. I kind of love like the found used universe aspect of it, but like. I don't really find Nazi Germany versus French resistance all that interesting as, like, the backbone of, like, an entire, like, mythology, per se.
Well, you know what they say, Nazis didn't have the Death Stars.
Nazis didn't have the Death Star.
I think that...
They did the V2.
The whole, like, kind of Nazi imagery, like, of it.
Yeah.
I that is, like, the backbone of the structure, but, like, the heart of the movie... rests with the characters and
you're
with
right. You're right.
I don't want to say it rests with the Jedi because he tried to make...
Well, the Force is nonsense.
He tried to make 3 movies focusing on the Jedi, and those movies were all terrible, but...
Well, the Force is nonsense, and, like, I think the best thing about Empire is when it says, like, oh, the Force is just about, like, self-actualization.
Right.
And, like, real tangible things people deal with. It's not really this tangible thing.
Just to jump ahead a little bit, one of the things I liked about The Last Jedi is that it got back to this idea of the Force as this... intangible, unexplainable thing that just kind of permeates the whole universe.
I think the Last Jedi also got the closest to like any reason as to why people join the dark side.
Okay, but let's talk about The Empire Strikes Back.
Let's talk about The Empire Strikes Back. So like, just sort of going off that, like, I kind of don't care about Han Solo and Princess Leia and the Millennium Falcon and all that, but. God, when Luke Skywalker lands on Yoda Planet...
Dagobah.
Yes.
Dagobah. I'm going to call it Yoga Planet, because I know you're going to do that.
You mean Yoda Planet?
Yoda Planet, yes.
You say Yoda.
Now that is a mistake on my part. I apologize.
Luke Skywalker on Yoga Planet is a movie that I might be amusing for 20 minutes.
Yeah. But like, he lands there, and it is like... There's like snakes and frogs and reptiles everywhere, and it's covered in smoke, and there's just such an atmosphere to that. And Yoda is just such an interesting player, and that is like that is the time where they go like, okay, the Force is about like internal conflict, it's about like growing up, it's about self-actualization, and it like it portrays that in really tangible and understandable ways, in really interesting ways. And, like, Yoda is an unbelievable puppet. We know this to be true. Jim Henson can do no wrong. There's just so much in there. And, like, the talks of... That is, like, the one point where I go, like, wow, this really is mythology. Yeah. This really is mythology I can get behind and I can enjoy.
Well, because if you watch Star Wars, the first one, like, it just feels like that movie could stand on its own. It just could be this fun little, like, adventure story. It's like
literally like a medal ceremony at the end where they stand all triumphant and, like, fade the black, we're done.
Right, exactly. Yeah. It feels like a fairy tale to some extent.
I think it's science fantasy.
And Empire, one of the many, many reasons I love this movie is that it takes all that and goes, okay, we're going macrocosmic with all of this. Yes. Like, still not, hugely epic by any means. This movie cost like $30 million, I think.
There's like a little bit more money in it. But...
George Lucas financed this movie himself, which is unthinkable when you look at what Star Wars movies are now.
Oh, yeah.
Like, and it has such a clarity about the universe that it is exploring and like what it wants to do with this world. It is like after, you know, a movie that is pure like myth and adventure and just pure like archetypal stuff, this movie goes, okay, these are people in a world, in a universe that we are going to push and challenge and like,
but it's also not afraid of being a soap opera. Like,
it's
not afraid to be like
Star Wars never has been.
Melodramatic. And like, it's like, Luke, I am your father is soap operatic.
Or maybe,
it's great.
Or maybe, hey, let's have dinner. Oh, door opens, suddenly Vader.
Yes. There's all of that sort of like twists and turns and things like that. And also, Lando is interesting.
Oh yeah,
I like his planet. That's cool. That's cool, and like the movie's gorgeous.
Yeah,
the movie's absolutely gorgeous. But like, there's always going to be an issue with me watching Star Wars, and I articulated, and I warned you about this before I came to watch it. Is that like just because of like it's not even so much that like my introduction to Star Wars is both movies and cultural osmosis. It's also like me watching movies and having all the cultural osmosis around them constantly, where it's like they say iconic lines and they just kind of feel like noise. I see iconic images and I kind of have to tell myself like, what was the intended point of this? Like beyond like all the iconography and all like the myth making of it, because like we're talking a lot about mythology as it ascertains to like Star Wars as an internal factor, but like Star Wars itself is mythology now.
Sure.
And like it is just so difficult for me to try and like tear that all down and try to get at like, okay, what is actually at the heart of this? What am I actually watching as like a movie that George Lucas funded himself with like a ragtag crew and some like wily veterans?
Well, I will just say I don't have this problem, and I think this is a perfect movie. So
okay, that's fine.
Hit me with it. Hit me with whatever you can articulate.
Well,
here.
I think I've already articulated like what issues I already have, and it is that like I kind of just don't care about like French Resistance v Nazi Germany as like the entire basis as mythology, and like I find like there are certain aspects of this world I find really interesting. Like I said, this movie's version of the Force is the most interesting it ever was.
Sure,
but the Force is still nonsense.
Well,
the Force is still nonsense and not very interesting. I'm just still kind of looking at this wondering, like, why is this worshipped? And do you have a theory about that?
Well, I mean, I can only speak for myself.
But why do you worship it then?
Well, okay, here's what I will say.
Okay.
If you ask different people, like, why do you love Star Wars, or why is Star Wars so popular, you're gonna get different answers.
Well, yes.
Like, you're gonna get, and you're gonna get a lot of contradictory answers,
which is why I'm kind of asking, like, why do you think
well, yeah, but
worshipped?
if you look at it, like, George Lucas himself has given many different accounts of why he even made the movie, so I think it's unreasonable to expect there to be any one unifying theory of why this connects with people.
Yes. And nor do I even want that.
Like, people will say, like, it works because it's super fun and just energizing, and it's just a delightful, like, romp through the galaxy.
You said something regarding simplicity when I asked you as to, like, why you find it interesting and why you like it. And I think that's something I was thinking about, like, that simplicity, it could be something that people latch to.
I think I would agree with that. Like, it's a simple...
It is simple escapism in a complex world, especially in the context of the late 70s and early 80s.
Yeah, it's escapism. Ask other people, they'll be like, oh, it's this grand mythology that just is so compelling, that just draws you in. And I can see both sides of this. I do also agree that, like, it's a distillation of, like, a lot of ideas that are as old as storytelling itself.
Yeah.
For me, personally, I think I kind of said this already, it just showed me, like, what movies could be. It showed me how you could create a completely believable, all-encompassing world on the screen, you know, and these are all things that I liked, like, when I was a kid. Now I think I go back to it. I have certainly reached the realization that most Star Wars movies are bad. Like, even Return of the Jedi, like, if you go back to it now, that is not a good movie. But, like, Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back, for me, are just towering works of world building, of cinematic technique, of like all fields of cinematic technique.
Yes.
Like the design, the visual effects, the sound design, the music, the acting, the characters, like all of that stuff. Just firing on all cylinders. Just like, this is what cinema is to me. And I can't ever extract myself from that.
Yeah.
I mean, like to sort of like fire back. Like, I think it's very interesting examples of all those, but I'd hardly think it's like some cinematic tour de force.
Well,
insofar as I think part of that like idea that like this is cinema is part of, and I'm sure like, and I'm not like doubting your love for Star Wars and like your belief that like these are great movies and are great examples of cinematic craft. But like, I think there's also like the idea that like, these things are David Lean epics, that these things are, like, perfection and immaculate. And I think part of the greatest charm of them is that they aren't.
Well, yeah,
I
totally
perfect
agree
and put together.
No, these movies are, like, small, they are, like, when I say, like, this is what cinema is, I'm not saying that, like, this is some grandiose, like, these movies show you what you can do with limited resources, with, like, you know, some parts that you cobble together into something that looks kind of cool.
This is like the finest mythology of, like, filmmaking, like, from nothing.
Well, to talk about, like, pure cinema, like, so many of the great Star Wars characters that we remember aren't much more than, like, a costume and a voice. Like, Boba Fett is one of the most iconic characters in film history, and he is just a cool costume design, a cool, an air of coolness about him.
Darth Vader is nothing more...
Yeah.
Darth Vader is nothing more than a black cape, a Nazi helmet, a cool voice, and some nice little backstory.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And, like, Empire shows you that, like, there is no reason that a Star Wars movie ever needs to cost more than the 2017 equivalent of $30 million. Yeah. Like, this is a perfectly constructed movie.
Okay.
Like, the structure of it is seamless. Like, it's this perfect way to challenge the characters. You send, like, the few rebels that we care about, Han Solo, Leia, Chewbacca, off on the run. They are pursued by the Empire. They are dodging danger everywhere they go. Meanwhile, you send Luke off to Dagobah to face, to look inward into himself, to face personal challenges, to grow as a person. Like, this is all... This is the perfect embodiment of what a sequel to a movie should be.
Okay.
And when I rewatched this movie, I watched it with my roommates, one of whom, Brady, who never listens to these, but if you happen to be listening to this one, hi Brady. Perhaps we'll have him on the show at some point. Brady does not like The Empire Strikes Back.
Okay, well, I'm saying a lot of, like, negative things here, but, like, a lot of them come from, like, a perspective of that, like, Star Wars ruined cinema.
Yeah, no. His criticism has nothing to do with that.
Okay.
He thinks Empire Strikes Back is a bad movie.
Okay, interesting.
And he said one of his big points that he made was that he feels like the chemistry or the romance between Han Solo and Princess Leia feels forced. And you could maybe make the point that, like, this is not the point in their relationship that we left off of that with them in the previous movie. Yeah. You know, like, you're coming into this with new dynamics.
Yeah.
But my argument is, like, who cares? Like, this is its own movie. This is... You know, I think this movie, like, except for the ending, which is a cliffhanger, and some people have complained about, although I do think you made a very good point that, like, leaving them on a note of despair is an interesting thing to do.
That's fascinating. We're like, holy shit. They're just on the run. Luke doesn't have his hand. Han Solo's in carbonite. What an interesting way to end a blockbuster.
Right. Yeah. And I don't really have a problem with that. And I think that when you come into it, like, you're aware that time has passed between these movies. You're aware that these people have been together for a while. You're aware that, like, you know, dynamics between people can shift, I think. And they do such a good job of so efficiently and, like, right off the bat, establishing the new dynamics. Like, Han Solo is, like, the spiky banter is there, like, right from the beginning. You're kind of like, oh, what? Okay, they have a thing for each other now? Well, okay, fine, whatever. Hey. Yeah, well, and Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher have great chemistry.
Yes.
And that all just completely works for me. I think it works for almost everybody, although I sense that you're about to say something.
Well, here's the thing about it, as far as, like, I'm going to agree with them insofar as that, like, all the acting in this movie is kind of awkward and stilted and campy, but they all have really good chemistry, and that pulls it through. Like I have some issues in regarding to like the Han Leia thing. It's like because like they do have chemistry and you do believe in them at the end. As a movie, as something I'm watching as entertainment, that works. But this is also like just like I can't turn off this part of my brain, and like this is in theory a workplace relationship where Han Solo is consistently like putting the moves on Leia and consistently like trying to undermine her, and that's something that doesn't age well for me.
That is a fair point.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Here's what I will counter argue.
Okay.
I think this is less of a workplace relationship. Well, I mean, to some extent,
yeah,
maybe,
so
sure.
It's weird because, like, it's, like, unofficial resistance, wartime, what is work,
right,
that
but also I think it's, like, it's two people in war. Like, I think Seven Samurai actually provides a very interesting point of comparison here.
Oh, interesting.
Because at that scene where I talked about with the samurai and the farmer's daughter, a villager says something like, "What's wrong with two people in love? Like, this is war. Like, this is like we might all die tomorrow. Like, this is what." And that's more what this feels like to me.
Okay.
These are like, and it really it's notable because it really sparks like once they go on the run. Yes. Like they are in the middle of this. They could die at any moment. And it's like, we're here, what are we doing? Like, we're attracted to each other, like, let's just go for it. And that works for me, I think.
Well, I also kind of view it from the fact that, like, Han Solo is a character that is literally worshipped. And, like, what does, like, a character like Han Solo being worshipped mean?
Right.
And for me, that's not great.
Certainly, I think maybe the culture does not have as much clarity around, like, Han Solo's very intentional, I think, character flaws.
Yes.
As much as maybe they should. I'm hesitant to blame that on the movie, although maybe you could.
I don't think Star Wars has the clarity around these sort of things like a Kurosawa does.
Perhaps.
At the very least. And, like, I think maybe it should have more.
All right.
That's like, my general thing. But, like, as you say, like, as, like, a movie is concerned, beyond, like, my general, like, extra filmic, like, cultural concerns, they do have chemistry. And you believe it when they say, "I love you, I know."
Yeah,
that works.
That's all great.
That works.
Yeah.
So like,
Carbonite.
Yeah. So like, I guess like we're kind of coming to the end of our like Empire things. So like, I'm gonna kind of come to like my final conclusion of like, I enjoyed it. It's a movie. It's got a lot of charm. Like I kind of like all like the anti David Lean stuff about it.
Yes.
I really like Dagobah and like Yoda and sort of like what they crystallize the Force as in this movie, and like Luke, I am your father deserves to be an iconic scene.
God, incredible.
And like the entire movie is entirely gorgeous.
As we are recording this, a Star Wars commercial has come on TV. Well, not even a Star Wars commercial. It's a Walmart commercial
with Star Wars iconography.
Okay,
I'll stop.
Anyway,
but like it is just very difficult for me like to like strip away the iconography and just strip away the cultural identity. Like I said this before, like I don't know how you like critique like Orthodox icons or the Bible. I feel like I'm kind of out of my league to review things that are literally worshipped.
Right.
Yeah.
But like I enjoyed my time. I think there's like some like disastrous cultural surroundings concerning it, and like I can't quite forgive it for ruining the cinematic art form, at least as it comes to blockbusters. But like I enjoyed my time with it, and like after watching 2 of the new Abominations, I have far more respect for it.
Are we about ready to get?
Do you have anything else to say about Empire?
I was gonna piggyback off your point you made a long time ago.
Okay.
I fell asleep during the last half of Return of the Jedi. I think I was like
I'm gonna put a pin in that for a second, but you keep going.
Like I sort of started dozing on. This was years ago, by the way, and I think this was the last time I saw it. So I remember I think I was kind of sick, and then I think I fell asleep like around the Wookiee part, and then I woke up with like Luke dragging Darth Vader onto the Imperial shuttle. It's like, wow, what I miss. Oh, wait. Oh, okay. Whatever. It's fine.
Well, sort of to go off of that, I kind of want you to explain because I don't, it's either I have not seen it or it's been like so long since I've seen like Return of the Jedi. So, like, what about Return of the Jedi doesn't work compared to Empire and Star Wars? Because I kind of want to. I think that would help us sort of like crystallize what we think about Empire and Star Wars.
Well, the biggest thing is like the fucking Ewoks.
Well, yeah,
like
like beyond like the really obvious, like those fucking abomination bears.
Because okay, well, Return of the Jedi is a movie that starts off pretty strong, I think.
Yes.
The whole Jabba's palace sequence is maybe a little too long, but there's a lot of the design of it is like full fruition of all it's
endlessly iconic.
Grotesque stuff that we've seen. That's all good stuff, and the plan that they do it's just a great like fun action sequence, and it's a great like resolution of everything we've seen
of the whole Tatooine involvement.
Yeah, it closes all the running threads that they left kind of dangling from the last movie.
Okay,
that's
and
all good
also
stuff.
and also from A New Hope.
Now the problem is, after that, Return of the Jedi is a movie that builds to a holding pattern that it holds for like the next hour and a half. Like you have Luke being conflicted and like wanting to go and like try to convince Vader to turn back to the good side, and then you have the rebels like very, very, very slowly and with the help of a very annoying Ewoks like moving toward destroying the shield of the Death Star, and then you have like the ground battle, which isn't that interesting, and the space battle, which isn't that interesting. Like the heart of the movie is Luke and Vader and the Emperor, which is kind of interesting stuff, but it is just the same beat, like repeated over and over and over again. It like turn, I'm not going to turn, I'm not going to turn for like an hour, and that's a big problem.
So what I'm hearing is that like it's like the others, but with much worse editing.
Yes, and also just like it's boring and like and also. And this is a big problem, and this is something we're going to talk about a lot more once we dive into Force Awakens.
Yeah.
They totally blew it with Han Solo. Like, they had the opportunity to have an incredible arc for Han Solo. When you first meet him in Star Wars, he is someone who is skeptical of all causes. He is only in it for himself, for money. He is someone who would never think about sacrificing himself for a cause
he just fucking
or for his
murders
friends.
someone in the first scene. This is a point that has been talked about over and over again throughout the culture. Harrison Ford wanted them to kill off Han Solo in this movie. George Lucas didn't want to because he was afraid of how it would affect toy sales. Yeah,
and
which is how they would govern the Star Wars stories from there on out.
Like, and you watch this movie and you go, oh shit, like, we've already reached the point where we're caring more about toys and about sales and about our brand than about telling a good story here. Yeah. And that is really what sinks this movie, because, think about it, if Han Solo had sacrificed himself for his friends at the end of Return of the Jedi, what an incredible culmination of his arc that would have been.
That would probably have ended the Star Wars movie. That might have, well, I don't know if it would have ended the Star Wars movies.
Well, the prequels or something.
The prequels would have happened regardless.
Yeah,
but
probably.
That would have been, like, Han Solo would have been a character with one of the best arcs across, like, a series of movies in history. And they just totally blew it.
I actually never thought of it that way. I just thought of it because, like, it just looks like...
It also just, it doesn't look as, like, nearly as good as the other two.
Like Empire looks amazing.
Empire's great. There's so
also
many...
has some, I mean, talk about that Superstar Destroyer, am I right?
Like, in the first two movies, like, George Lucas is constantly just, like, almost like just pulling iconic imagery out of his ass and just going like, look at it, it's great, and it works. It's just instantly brilliant and iconic, and it totally works. Return of the Jedi like just doesn't have that.
No, like everything like the lighting just is like bland and like and uneven.
And like one of the great what ifs in movie history, I think, is he wanted Spielberg to direct this movie, but he couldn't because it was being made outside of the DGA, the Directors Guild. And what Spielberg would have done with this movie, I think he would have had the balls to kill Han Solo, quite frankly.
Well, then I don't want. The problem is then, like, what does Spielberg do next? And then I get worried.
Well, I don't know. That to me is one of the great what ifs of movie history.
Okay.
And,
that is
but
really interesting.
we'll never know. And Return of the Jedi is just, it's not good.
It's still better than what we're about to talk about.